Resident Evil Requiem has finally been released, and the shameless glazing for this game is out of control. The usual suspects that get early access to every big title that launches are already controlling the narrative around this game, driving up both sales numbers and engagement. And actually playing the game to completion, and multiple times at that, has made me wonder just how many of these reviewers, as well as regular players they've influenced to purchase the game, have played it for longer than 2 hours.
It's funny you say that because I get this as anecdotal, but a guy that I work with asked me the other day if I had played it. And when I said yes, he said, dude, it's amazing, right? And I told him that I thought it was mid at best and bad depending on which character you're playing as, and he was absolutely shocked. I asked him how much he'd played, and he told me 45 minutes.
That's so typical, dude. People will play a game for 15 minutes, see how good it looks, and maybe see a reasonable performance and go, holy peak! And then post a positive review on Steam.
Many such cases, unfortunately.
Consumer culture's out of control, dude.
Well, and I mockingly told him that there's no way he could have spent more than 5 minutes doing anything but holding forward to walk. But as you kind of called there without even knowing, he told me that the graphics and cutscenes were why he loved it so much. And this obviously isn't representative of everyone, but to me, it does feel like the perfect representation of the new swath of Resident Evil fans.
Well, it's really just normies in general is what it is. Which a new release comes out, they instantly love it uncritically. That's just how it goes. Whatever narrative gets set, that's what they believe. But let's not waste any more time. Let's get right into the meat of this game. Now, you start the game playing as Grace, whose gameplay sections are more survival horror and in line with the early Resident Evil games. And Leon's sections are more akin to, say, RE4, 5, 6, more the heavy action games. And instead of neatly separating these two campaigns like they've done in past games, they merge them together in what feels like one big disjointed mess with really, really horrendous pacing. I mean, you essentially play the first half as Grace with tiny little Leon segments strewn throughout that maybe last 5 to 15 minutes. And then the second half of the game, you reverse that, where you're playing mostly as Leon with tiny little Grace segments strewn throughout. It's a really odd way of doing things. And I'm not opposed to having some horror and action elements within the same campaign, but it's incredibly jarring to play as Leon slicing and dicing enemies with a chainsaw and a hatchet and all sorts of guns for 5 minutes, then to jump back to Grace for 2 to 3 hours of very slow, methodical navigating through the map, only to jump back to Leon for a few minutes to get back in the action. It's just odd, dude.
And you're not exaggerating there either. You genuinely get Leon segments that are 5 minutes or less sandwiched between Grace segments that are 2 hours plus.
And then vice versa on the last half.
As you said, dividing it into 2 separate campaigns would have been so preferable for the pacing. The intro to this game specifically just goes on for way too long. I'm not exaggerating when I say that in roughly the first hour and 20 minutes or so of this game, all you will have done is watch cutscenes, slowly walk forward during scripted events, with 2 5-minute or less action segments as Leon that are essentially tutorials. Even with being able to skip cutscenes, this intro is going to destroy this game's replayability with all of the unskippable slow walking sections towards the beginning.
Oh, absolutely. I played through this game multiple times getting ready for the review, and all the walking sections butchered the pacing and replayability of this game. They massacre it.
Well, one thing that's true for both Grace and Leon is that almost every gameplay segment throughout this game is incredibly formulaic and predictable. Almost every level comes down to collect 3 items to progress. You have to collect the 3 cubes in the care center to get out. You've got to collect the 3 joint plugs in the basement. And later, as Leon in Raccoon City, you've got to collect the 3 detonator parts. And on top of this predictable and formulaic gameplay, I noticed too that healing is so abundant in both characters' campaigns that it really feels hard to die even when you make mistakes constantly.
Yeah, that's certainly true.
The clumsy, disjointed nature of this campaign really leads me to believe that they wanted this game to be all about Grace, but Capcom knew they needed to include Leon to sell copies of the game since they knew a lot of people wouldn't care for Grace.
And the Leon segments are just unapologetic fan service. They really are.
Maybe don't make Grace such an annoying retard if you want her to be the focal point of the game. That's the real solution.
Truly.
And speaking of Grace, let's jump straight into her gameplay segments as the next topic. The first major Grace segment in the game is the care center. And honestly, I think this is the best Grace segment, although in fairness, she had a lot of segments that I really didn't care for. And I think the reason I liked it the best is it's at least attempting to balance exploration, puzzle solving, and inventory management all in one section. Unfortunately, even the better Grace segments like this one still have some glaring issues.
The first part of Grace's opening segment there gives you so little ammo that you almost feel railroaded into sneaking around the whole time. But roughly at the halfway part of this first intro segment, you gain the ability to craft ammo via infected blood, and don't ask me how this works, I don't know, it doesn't make sense.
Neither do the creators.
Not long after you unlock this, you can craft so much ammo, and even a new tool called the hemolytic injector, which makes zombies explode. I mean, there was a part in our stream where in the beginning of the game, I had over 100 bullets because you can craft so many with this new blood mechanic.
I will say I do really like the addition of the hemolytic injector just as a tool to strategically eliminate tougher threats like the unique chef enemy or the blister heads that pop up later in this area, as well as using it strategically to keep zombies from resurrecting later since it explodes them.
Sure, I don't mind its inclusion, and it's kind of necessary for some of the harder enemies. This section also had a lot of potential, but the blood crafting feels like it really ruins a lot of the careful balance of a Resident Evil game, because before you unlock it, you have so little ammo that you have to run from almost everything, but once you're able to craft these resources, you end up with more than enough to clear the care center with ease as Grace.
Yeah, that's the problem for me, is it's both extremes. You either have zero ammo or you have abundant ammo. There's never really much of a balance once you get the blood crafting.
Right. And following the trend of Village, the puzzles are so obnoxiously easy that they may as well not even exist. I mean, 2/3 of the main puzzles in this section have the answer to them like 2 inches away from the place where you punch the symbols in on the cue boxes, while the third one is a big scripted event. And some of the more minor ones that have notes near them with the important text for solving them highlighted in yellow. We dialed back the yellow paint in the game and we put it in the notebooks, because you can't be bothered to actually read a note. We have to spell out the exact important bits so you can just skim past it. And to be fair, I'm not like a huge puzzle guy. I'm not crazy about puzzles. But if you're gonna make them so lazy, why even include them in the first place? I mean, puzzles in this game essentially just end up being, hey, here's a lock, go find the key. That's the puzzle in this game.
Grace also has far too many hide-and-seek segments throughout this campaign. For example, the basement segment underneath the care center has you constantly moving these batteries around to turn lights on and off to keep the monster at bay so she can't go in the light. But as you move to the next section in the area, you'll need to take the battery with you, at which point the lights will go out and the monster will start to cut off your path, forcing you to either just sit and wait for it to go away or loop way around. Now, if they did this sparingly, it'd probably be okay, but it happens so often that it's far too predictable to have the intended effect of horror.
Right. Well, the problem, again, like we said before, is how formulaic it is. It's hard to be scared or feel any level of tension whenever I know exactly when the monster will be coming for me.
Yeah, and later in the water treatment plant, there's a little bit of a twist on this where you need to go around and pull these 3 levers to open up the roof and shine light down on the monster. And in these segments, the monster chases you, but this time you have enough magnum bullets to actually stun it to give you enough time to pull the levers. But this also really has no horror effect because you're under 0 threat in these segments because the monster's not nearly fast enough to catch you, resulting in these sections just feeling more tedious than scary.
Well, if you get cornered, just blast her with the magnum and she's stunned for genuinely 6 seconds.
There's also this really egregious segment in the late game where you play a flashback of a young girl in which you slowly wander around an orphanage and you constantly need to hide from the other girls. This one just absolutely kills the pacing of the game since you spend the entire time ducking behind corners and hiding under beds, waiting for them to move out of the way, that I fear it's going to destroy repeat playthroughs.
Oh, it does. And what makes it worse is she moves so unbelievably slow that these sections are unbearable on repeat playthroughs. And it takes forever, too. It feels like this section takes like 30 minutes.
Especially given that it's breaking up the already kind of wacky pace of the story to do something totally unrelated to what your main characters are doing.
Well, what kind of pacing is it to go from the Tarkino of Leon on a motorcycle, gun jousting with Victor, to whatever this is? What is this pacing? On top of the hide and seek segments, there are also a bunch of scripted chase segments that, to me, really aren't that scary. And it's primarily due to the fact that you move so incredibly slow as Grace that there really doesn't feel like there's much of a chance for tension.
That's my issue with these chase scenes. You move so slow that I cannot be scared. Because realistically, the monster should have caught me 10 minutes ago.
By way of example, when Grace wakes up in the care center and encounters the monster for the first time, the girl, you're blocked from going straight into the room where you could grab the screwdriver to progress and instead have to slow walk in a dark area until you hit the scripted scene where she comes out of the ceiling to then run away and then run back to get it once she leaves. The scripted chase sequence later in the care center with Chunk is also laughably bad, as there's a safe room genuinely 2 inches away from where it starts, and he moves about as fast as you'd expect.
You've got an immediate safe haven the second the chase starts. Where is the tension?
I guess it's in the jump scare, I suppose. But then you look at him and it's like, what is this? Like, he's just a fat guy. He's just a fat guy with bug eyes. That's what he is. But even in the horror-focused segments as Grace, I really struggled to find a lot of it scary. And this should have been so easy to scare both of us because neither of us are big horror fans. And I know y'all don't know this about me, but Chimpo, you know I am very easily scared by horror games and movies. And this just didn't do it for me.
To let the people in on a secret, when you played Resident Evil Village, if you played that game, there's a part where a giant freak baby monster creature chases you around. Kodo outright could not play this by himself. I came over to his house to beat it for him, and eventually I think the little guy was able to finally play it on his own and later playthroughs with the lights on and, holding a dog or something.
Yeah. That's how I had to beat it. I was at went over to mom and dad's house, had a dog in my lap, lights on, sound off.
Yeah, this is the guy that you failed to scare with Resident Evil Requiem, Capcom.
Dude, that baby was scary, though. They actually did a decent job setting him up. But like we said before, man, Resident Evil 9 is so incredibly formulaic that it really detracts from the overall game experience. I mean, strict adherence to this formula makes the game very predictable. And as a result, the horror often fails to land because I know when it's coming. It's not a surprise, it's not secret. I mean, this is the third mainline game in a row with patrolling stalker enemies that are far more tedious than scary, and it only wastes time but doesn't actually build tension.
Well, in that example of the baby in Village, one thing they do decent there is you don't really get a great look at him before the chase, whereas the problem in this game, far more often than not, is you see the monsters way too often, and on top of that, they look goofy as hell. Good horror should cause some stress to build up in your mind at the thought of what might be around that corner or what's in the other room when you hear those noises. You can't just clumsily toss monsters on screen at every available opportunity and still expect us to be scared.
Right, the horror needs to be building in your head as what might be there. You let your imagination do the heavy lifting, and you set the mood through ambience, through sound design, through lighting. There's so many intricate elements of horror that Capcom, at least in this game, fundamentally fails to get.
For example, the first time that you run into the girl, the camera lingers on her for so long that absolutely nothing is left to the imagination, and it really detracts from the horror elements that should be present here. It also doesn't help you get these goofy monsters like Chunk that talk to you and have absolutely ridiculous dialogue, which kills the mood. When you first see Chunk, he literally yells, "Stop moving!" The animations for some of the monsters and zombies are also so bad that it's funny. Like in that orphanage section we talked about, there's scenes where these manufactured little girls fall out of the sky and break their necks when they hit the ground. One of them snaps the neck of a doctor and it looks so unrealistic and stupid that it's funny. One of the zombies does this crazy face rub on Grace if she gets you in a grab. Just some wacky animations that aren't scary and just really detract from the overall mood. I also noticed there's a massive lack of ambience or tense musical notes, and again, they detract from the horror. There's no ominous or foreboding music that might set the mood of what might jump out at you. And really, they don't do a great job even with sound effects to make you nervous about what might be places. Instead, they'd rather rely on just cheap crap jump scares like the lamp falling out of the closet on top of you or the body falling out as you open a door. And on top of the lack of ambient music, Grace's excessive moaning and whimpering kills the mood. I seriously don't know who decided we needed to hear this the entire game during her segments, but it sucks.
Near the end of the game, Grace gets so many resources that she can essentially kill everything in the arc with ease. Enemies that used to be really tough and scary, like the Lickers, are easily dispatched in this section with the acid bottles and Molotovs that are endlessly showered upon you via the crafting system. And aiming with Grace also feels pretty bad before you get the stabilizer upgrades that steady your aim. It's especially bad on controller if you leave camera shake on, which it probably will be because it's left on by default and it's on max by default.
The combination of all these things just make Grace's campaign parts feel like kind of a drag to play. They're not scary, and they're not exactly fun either.
But now moving over to Leon's gameplay. While there are some bright spots in Leon's gameplay sections toward the second half, I'm thinking particularly the fallen towers with the glass floors that allow you to shoot out the glass panes beneath zombies and cause them to fall to their death. And you can even use it strategically to block off certain areas you don't want them coming through. And it's even incorporated into the level design. Unfortunately, these sections often end up being little more than mediocre action set pieces with subpar gunplay. And admittedly, the Raccoon City segments are the part I had the most fun with in the game, but they still weren't great. A lot of this game feels deeply, deeply mid. Now, while Leon has a solid assortment of guns, your standard fare, the enemy AI is really nothing special to make you feel like you need to use them effectively to survive within the levels. And that's exacerbated further by the hatchet parry, which we'll talk about later.
One of the stupid things that enemies will do in these sections is you'll have zombies just burst out of the floor or burst through stationary cabinets and just instantly grab you for cheeky damage that it feels like you couldn't really avoid without just knowing they were there. And there's also these throwable items, and I have to say this is one of the laziest mechanics that I don't even know why it exists because it adds nothing to the game. You literally will just see a button prompt telling you that there's an item on the ground, and when you walk up and press the button, it auto throws and aims it at the enemy and just either kills them or knocks them down. Very lazy design in my opinion. And speaking of lazy design, there's even a motorcycle segment where you're riding through the city and shooting these dog enemies that chase you, but you actually don't control the bike. It just auto drives for you. Seems like a downgrade of even RE6, which, people already didn't like very much.
Yeah, the only thing you control there is the gun, is aiming the gun and shooting. That's about it.
Which works fine on something like Resident Evil 5 when you're the gunner on the back of a truck and not the driver, but when you're driving the vehicle, it feels really weird to have no control over it. And in fairness, Resident Evil was never a series that either of us found to be great due to its combat, and that remains true here. Resident Evil 4 took the series in an action-oriented direction, but the Resident Evil 4 remake style combat that they use in this game is okay at best for me. And it really begs the question, why did they focus almost exclusively on combat for Leon's segments without much care to the other elements of the game in these sections?
Right, dude. Leon's gameplay has almost no focus on the things that made Resident Evil Resident Evil. When you play as Leon, there's almost no focus on careful resource management or outmaneuvering your enemies. Instead, a lot of the time it just boils down to pressing L1 at the right time. RE9 is quite literally parry slop. I mean, the ability to parry in this game breaks it in half. Dude, I beat the final boss of the game without taking a hit because the parry is so strong and the window is insanely generous.
That is wild. I did not have Resident Evil being parry slop on my bingo card for this year. It's also insanely stupid, and not in kind of a campy, charming boulder punch kind of way, that Leon, a human with zero powers, can parry the attacks of a nemesis when it is the size of a building. I'll also point out it is incredibly lazy that the final boss of this game is the exact same final boss as the Resident Evil 3 remake in design. The boss fight's slightly different. It just seems like so much of what fans love from the original Resident Evil games is absent in all of Leon's sections. There's no survival horror tension because you're incredibly powerful in this game. At one point later in the game, you fight 6 lickers at once as Leon, but you can just wreck them with ease. They were a massive threat in the Resident Evil 2 remake, which is still a modern game pretty similar to this one. But in that game, you actually had to account for them and dedicate resources to them, whereas in this game, no such tension exists with those enemies. And we mentioned it earlier, but the parry even further reduces the risk reward that used to be associated with enemy encounters, since it's essentially a get out of jail free card that lets you play extremely recklessly. The problem in this, as opposed to Resident Evil 4, is that you had the limitations of tank controls back then, whereas in this game, your power has gone up a ton, but the enemies hasn't. As you said too, there's no inventory management really in these sections. Leon's base inventory is so massive that I don't think either of us ever needed to really make a decision on what to keep or what to throw away.
Never. I would just combine it and turn it into something, and then I'm good.
There's no dark and creepy atmosphere. Leon barely needs to even use his flashlight in this game because pretty much all the sections in Raccoon City are really bright and don't require it. And even the campy charm that Leon had in Resident Evil 4 is largely gone in this game. A lot of the campy moments here with him spouting these one-liners feel more forced and self-aware than the more earnest stuff that you see in Resident Evil 4.
Did you also notice that for whatever reason, Leon now has a hatchet instead of a knife? Like, dude, don't get me wrong, the hatchet's cool and all, and it has some stylish finishers, but Leon's thing has always been the knife. I mean, I'm thinking about the Krauser battle. Like, it's kind of in his character to use a knife. He's trained with the knife. But speaking of this hatchet, the durability feels so oddly out of place, and you could sharpen in combat at any time, and it really isn't even risky to do so. It's pretty quick and low cost. And I feel like the devs intended the sharpening mechanic to serve as a limit on your ability to parry endlessly, but in practice, having to sharpen really doesn't make that much of a difference since, again, it is so fast and easy to do.
I honestly thought the melee combat for Leon as a whole felt pretty janky and didn't really add a whole lot because most of it comes down to just getting button prompts after you get a stun on the enemies from a headshot that just lets you do a finisher.
Right, that is definitely the most efficient way of doing things. And the same can be said of a lot of the bosses. A lot of the bosses in Leon's segment are pretty bad, honestly. As mentioned earlier, a lot of this is due to the parry mechanic. For example, Mr. X, Hunk, Victor, all of these bosses are heavily designed around you frequently parrying due to how slow Leon moves. This makes them simultaneously really easy and also kind of boring, since none of them feel that unique, mainly because one button invalidates most, if not all, of what they do. And speaking of some other bosses, the chunk fight towards the beginning of the game is also really bad, because he gets stuck in the doorway and allows you to just sit there and blast his head without a care in the world. I think on my second playthrough, I genuinely killed him before he was able to leave the doorway.
Very threatening, exactly what you want out of a tense boss fight. Now that we've kind of covered the makeup of the campaign, I want to quickly talk about some missing features and just some odd settings choices that don't really sit right with me. Not including a mercenaries mode in this game really sucks, especially considering that I don't really feel the campaign has great replay value, especially when you factor in there's no scoring system or chapter select, so you're going to be playing it start to finish in order every time. It's also wild to me, the first-person FOV is so zoomed in that it is nauseating to play, and there's no slider to change it.
Yeah, dude. I suffered through that in my entire first campaign as Grace. Then I changed it and never went back. The FOV is insane.
And what's crazy is they tell you the intended experience playing as Grace is to use the first-person camera, so the only way to really fix this is to go against that and swap to third-person. But even third-person comes with concessions because what they do, as you know, is say during a chase scene, Grace actually moves much faster than she did in first-person, but they make her constantly stumble to make up for this fact. It really makes no sense. Like, they just both handle terribly. In true Capcom fashion, they also lock insanity difficulty from the start. This is unnecessary because there are going to be players that just want to jump straight into the harder modes immediately, but this is a staple of Capcom at this point. They did it in DMC5 as well. I also found the distinction between the modern and classic modes almost non-existent. The intent of classic is to limit saving the game by tying it to the ribbons, like older Resident Evil games. And it's funny, on your first playthrough, you picked modern and I did classic, but ribbon cases and blood are so abundant that I was able to craft so many of them. There was no difference in our playthroughs, other than I may have lost 20 or 30 minutes of progress at one point being dumb, whereas you just get autosaves all the time from the modern mode. I'm also not a big fan of the fact that New Game Plus doesn't allow you to carry over your weapon upgrades and inventory like Village did. Instead, you have these challenge points where you can buy things like infinite ammo or costumes, but your weapon upgrades and your inventory don't carry over. And lastly, it's just odd that things like motion blur are on by default, camera shake is set to the maximum intensity by default, and there's a film grain applied to the picture that you cannot turn off. It really doesn't make sense to limit us on any of these. Why not give us more options to tune the game better?
But now let's hit on a really, really big section, and probably one of my major issues with this game. The story and characters are so completely beyond retarded, it's hard to put into words.
We're gonna catch hell for this section, but I'm here for the smoke because this story sucks.
It's bad. Every time you answer a question, you don't actually get an answer. You get more questions. And the deeper you go, the worse it gets. I mean, this is Death Stranding 2 levels of retarded. We're introduced to Grace by the game showing us that she's an FBI agent who also serves as a tech analyst. And her director sends her to the Wrenwood Hotel to investigate a string of strange murders. And this guy is aware that 8 years ago, Grace's mother was murdered right in front of her at this very hotel, and he opts to send her there. I mean, this girl is a stuttering, nervous wreck throughout the whole game, and this man decides to send her there and send her alone.
If this is about the report you asked for yesterday, it'll be ready in 2 days, tops. Who's there?
Today, Junior?
It's to the point. He's either literally working for the villain, which we never see any evidence of, or he is just an irredeemable retard that sent Stuttering Stanley alone to this hotel where her mother was previously murdered.
You think there'd be a conflict of interest, but I guess not.
Well, the FBI in this game's DEI department worked overtime getting him and Grace on board here. We find out that Victor, the main villain, planted that body to lure Grace to the hotel. When she arrives, we see the flashback of her mother's murder, and it truly plays out in the stupidest way possible, because whenever the lights go out, they're attacked by this man, but Grace's mom shoots their attacker. Unfortunately for them, this guy later comes back, and I kid you not, silently teleports behind Grace's mom, kills her, and then instantly dies and falls crashing into a table with a lantern on it that sets the hotel on fire.
Yeah, he can magically silently teleport and survive multiple gunshot wounds just long enough to complete his objective, and then he just peaced out. That further begs the question, I mean, we know Victor sent this assassin, but why would he even send him? I mean, why kill the one person who has info that you want and potentially kill the girl who you believe to be the key of everything? I mean, in an in-game file called the Disposal Team Report, you find evidence that the zombie in the beginning was an assassin. And again, this begs so many questions. There's an in-game file that reveals that Victor knew about Grace's existence since 2004. So knowing what he knows, Victor decided to wait 14 years to then randomly murder Grace's mom, and then doesn't even bother to kidnap her until another 8 years later when he randomly decides to renew his pursuit. Like, make this make sense. Why? Was there a reason for any of this?
I still don't even know how Victor found out about Elpis or Grace in the first place. We're told in the game that Oswald Spencer never told anyone about Grace but Alyssa. I actually went on the Resident Evil wiki, and they claim that Victor was a researcher that worked under Spencer at one time, and that his reason for killing Grace's mom is that she was investigating his Elpis experiments at his clinic. But the wiki sources Alyssa's journal for this, and it only shows that she noticed Victor stalking her not that she was ever investigating him. But getting back to the plot, Grace goes back and retrieves the notebook and disc that her mom hid behind the painting, which, sure is lucky that it was still there all these years later instead of being destroyed by the massive fire. Grace gets bitten by a cop that was infected by the T virus, but she never turns, so she's either immune or this is a strain of the T virus that isn't transmitted by bite, which has been shown in the Resident Evil series before. But this will be foreshadowing for a crucial plot point with Grace later. She ends up running into Victor in the hotel once she gets away from the cop, and he knocks her out and takes her to his clinic just as Leon shows up in the city. And before Leon can apprehend him, Victor infects multiple citizens with a dart gun to slow Leon down and eventually lose him. Sherry tells Leon that Victor owns a clinic and gives him the address, and when Leon arrives at the clinic, a scene that a lot of you probably saw from the pre-release footage and people had issues with, plays out exactly as we saw it then. He watches the nurse that welcomed him into the clinic slowly get chainsawed from behind by a zombie doctor and does nothing. He sees the doctor coming, has ample time to pull out his gun and shoot, and does nothing.
I don't know what's happening. Some kind of mass hysteria. The hospital is on lockdown. Doctor.
Calm down.
It's also kind of funny, like, the zombie even has a moment to speak and for Leon to clearly see he's infected, says something to the woman, and then chainsaws her.
And then makes a cringe wisecrack after watching a woman be murdered.
I think I want a second opinion.
Like, Leon is either just a complete retard or just irredeemably evil. Not sure which. Probably a bit of both. We then cut to Grace waking up in the clinic. She frees herself, and then she gets chased and grabbed by the giant monster woman. Leon shows up just in the nick of time and blows the monster's head off to save her, but he's then immediately confronted by Victor and knocked out. This scene is pretty hilarious because at the start of Leon noticing Victor's there, he's got quite a bit of distance between himself and Victor, but instead of, shooting him or taking a step back and raising his gun, he bum rushes Victor with his gun out, and Victor immediately grabs him and puts him in a chokehold. And throughout this entire segment, Victor allows Grace to wander the care center filled with all of these dangerous zombies. And I have to ask, it's clear that he thinks she's the key, so why would he allow this? He's got cameras set up all over this clinic, so it's not like she could exactly hide from him.
It's also crazy that he sees this girl that's 110 pounds soaking wet and then thinks she'll be fine in a zombie apocalypse all by herself. Like, he has so much confidence in this girl. It's crazy how careless he is with Grace, who he views as the key to everything. But speaking of Grace, Grace later finds a little girl named Emily in a cell, and there's a man outside the cell who is bleeding out, who with his last final dying breath warns her not to get close to the girl. And yet again, we have a scene that exposes Grace as an absolute idiot. I mean, somehow she's an FBI tech analyst, yet she has to ask the girl if she's blind, despite seeing her cataracts and reading in Braille.
Cataracts. You can't see, can you?
Grace somehow doesn't notice the dead body or the giant hole in the ceiling of the roof that appears later on, and she doesn't even realize later that the doll in Marie's room is the same doll in the girl's dungeon in the basement, meaning that the girl that was next to Emily's cell transformed into a monster, meaning that Emily will probably transform into a monster at some point. Does she care about any of this? No, never.
Well, anyone with a pulse could see what was going to happen to Emily, except for Grace. She's only an FBI intelligence analyst, though, so I guess, putting the pieces together is just a little too tough for her.
Dude, and what makes it even more ridiculous is Grace goes out of her way to endanger Emily for literally no reason, because she's stupid. So the final medallion puzzle, where you have to press the sun, star, or moon keys, that puzzle, the last one, is in Braille with no symbols above it. And for some reason, Grace decides to carry Emily to it so that she can read it. Once she gets the final medallion to leave the clinic, the girl busts through the wall, and this is where you see that she has healing powers. And then this girl grabs Emily and descends into the basement. Now, it's important to note that Grace endangered Emily here for genuinely no reason. If the expert FBI tech analyst had paid attention, she would have realized that every machine uses Braille and that all she would have to do is write it down or memorize the Braille under each one of the symbols of the boxes and just use it on the last one where the symbols weren't present. That's all she had to do. And Grace being so stupid and unobservant and ignorant will be the justification for why she makes so many insanely dumb decisions later on.
Yeah, because the symbols are worn down on this box, somehow that means she can't just go look at the other ones and remember the dot pattern. She only has to memorize 3 of them. But Grace ends up following the girl into the basement and eventually frees Emily, powers the elevator, and rides it back to the surface to later leave the clinic. And luckily, there's a helicopter pilot outside, but he doesn't have the key to the copter, and he's got an injured leg. So Grace agrees to go get the key, and she fights through a bunch of zombies on her way there because she rides down this elevator to a hidden lab that Victor has, and she overhears that Victor wants her because she's the key to some bioweapon called Elpis. He then gets word on a radio about something, and after receiving it, decides to set the facility to self-destruct. And I have to wonder, don't you think you want to make sure you actually have Grace securely in your possession and that she hasn't already been killed by zombies before you just blow up your fancy lab?
Isn't it also the tiniest bit suspicious that your elevator, your secret elevator that brings the entire room down is not in the place that you left it? I mean, what are we even doing?
Well, he's got the deduction skills of an FBI agent. In this game's universe anyways. Grace eventually gets the key, leaves the facility, gives it to the pilot, and they take off in the helicopter. But before they do, the zombies latch onto it, and not soon after they're in the air, the zombies actually break through the window and cause them to crash. And Grace doesn't even shoot the zombies once they break the glass, allowing them to grab the pilot. And the way this scene is shot is crazy because the helicopter hits a tree on the way down, and this thing defies all the laws of physics to turn itself at a 90-degree angle and teleport through the pilot's heart just for this, crazy moment of fear with the pilot being killed. It's so dumb. And then you immediately cut over to Leon, who sees the crash and uses a sniper rifle to fend off the zombies to allow Grace to get inside this church. And once he joins her in the church, he stays behind to continue to fend off the zombies that are coming in and allow her to escape to this underground water treatment plant. The girl pursues Grace and Emily down there, and Grace eventually is able to open a hatch, which shines light down on the girl and kills her. But just after this happens, Emily suddenly mutates into a giant, crazy-looking flesh monster, and Leon kills her before she can attack Grace and Leon. Now, this is where it gets wild. Grace is so mad at Leon for killing the giant flesh monster that she gives him back his magnum and immediately just soys out and leaves. And this scene simultaneously shows how retarded both Grace and Leon are in this game, because Grace is enraged that Leon killed Emily, but keep in mind, she just killed the other little girl, whose name is Marie. That giant monster, that was also a little girl. Like, this is peak woman logic, where she's pissed at Leon for killing Emily's monster form, but she just killed another little girl who had transformed into a monster 2 seconds ago.
Yeah, but the story has already shown she's retarded, so she never puts it together, so she doesn't have to feel bad about it.
True. Or where's the sympathy for my boy Chunk?
I mean, he is kind of just a victim, to be honest.
He's another one of Victor's experiments. He didn't ask for this.
And they're laughing at him. My boy's in pain and we're laughing.
But getting back to this scene, as Grace is walking away from Leon in anger, she walks down a hallway and a small flight of steps, and at the top of the stairs, Victor's there to greet her, and then he opens a big hangar door to reveal a new villain we haven't seen before named Zeno. They inform Grace that she's the key to Elpis, and she just goes with them without question, despite having been choked, kidnapped, and bound to a table with her blood being drawn. Grace is an irredeemable retard unfit to work at McDonald's, much less the FBI. And it doesn't help that the way this scene is shot, Leon is literally in earshot while this conversation goes down. There's absolutely no chance that he didn't hear and see the hangar door open and see the villains just standing there.
And let's presume that he didn't see the hangar door open. Let's presume he didn't see anything. How could he have missed the helicopter? That's what I want to know. Are you
Yeah, those
deaf
things
too?
tend to be pretty loud.
This is also made even dumber because when we get a cut to black and we now shift over to playing as Leon, Leon is now driving his Porsche to Raccoon City and is on the phone with Sherry talking about rescuing Grace. You know, the woman he just let walk away with the bad guys? I mean, he's willing to risk everything to rescue Grace, but just lets her leave. No problem.
He lets her leave with the villains who have been torturing them the entire game, and the next time you see him, he's willing to die to save Grace.
When Leon gets to Raccoon City, he finds dead BSAA soldiers and grabs the chip out of one of their intact helmets and connects it to his phone. Now, the video shows that they were there for Elpis and were all killed by Xeno. Now, in the footage, Xeno's gun is melting people. This dude has the bloody mess perk from Fallout. He is turning people into Mountain Dew Code Red. And yet somehow, the dude who had the camera installed in his helmet gets shot in the face. And even though Xeno's gun can make someone's entire torso disappear, this guy's camera is perfectly fine. But whatever, small point, whatever. When Leon manages to assemble his detonator, he drives the motorcycle through the gate and is confronted by Victor, who tries to kill him with a rocket launcher. Which, why? I mean, earlier in the story, Victor has endless opportunities to kill Leon, but he doesn't. He takes him captive. So why now all of a sudden do you want to kill him? Are we supposed to believe that he kept Leon alive for genuinely no reason, just so that he could kill him later? What is the point of this?
He's evil, bro.
That's unironically the answer. Now, as the motorcycle chase continues, it eventually ends with Leon and Victor gun jousting, resulting in Victor's death. Now, admittedly, there's a lot of over-the-top stuff in this game that felt so forced that it wasn't charming. And I hate to say it, but this was a rare case of the Tard Kino.
That's a great word for it.
That's what one of the fellows in our stream lovingly dubbed it, was Tard Kino, and it fits. It really does fit. It was a charming moment.
One of the rare ones in this. And by the way, Kodo isn't exaggerating when he said that they motorcycle joust. Both of these guys have guns, by the way. They line up at opposite ends of the road and drive at each other in a straight line and don't shoot till they're like an inch away from each other. And Victor still somehow misses all his shots. It's just insane.
Keep in mind also, Victor has a massive gash in his gas tank because Leon stuck his hatchet in it. And it's like, well, get off the motorcycle, you tard. What are you doing?
Yep. He ends up rolling off the bridge with his motorcycle to his death.
Yeah, and then, well, his death, air quotes, because everyone just kind of magically comes back to life except for Timu Wesker.
And speaking of Timu Wesker, Xeno reveals to Grace that she was created and that clones were made of her, but that she is the original.
So many attempts. So many failures. Copies. Crafted to duplicate you.
Now, right after he says this, you have that flashback scene that we mentioned earlier, where you play as a little girl that's potentially a lab creation. And this scene creates far more questions than it answers, particularly surrounding Grace and how she could possibly be the original, because Chloe, who we play as in this scene, was already alive in 1990, and Grace wasn't even born until the early 2000s. Now, Xeno's obviously mistaken here, but how is he such a moron that he doesn't realize Grace can't be the original when he's literally looking at the file of a supposed clone of Grace from the year 1990?
Keep in mind, Grace was a teenager in 2018. So the timeline here, it ain't adding up. It ain't mathing.
Leon stumbles upon Grace and Xeno having this conversation, but before he can really confront them, he gets interrupted by Mr. X, whom he promptly kills before descending into the entrance of Ark. He also kills Hunk while he is down here too, because, you know, we can't go 5 seconds without having a callback to better games.
Yeah, this game is shamelessly filled with member berries that have absolutely no substance. I mean, this includes Mr. X, Hunk, the gun shop, and the cop there from Resident Evil 2 Remake.
Well, these things are just thrown on screen and shoved in your face. It's just straight up key jingling. It's like, hey, Remember these cool things from the old games you liked? No reason for them to really be there. Just, oh, flashback, without any substantive payoff.
But moving on, Leon finds Zeno trying to get Grace to give him the password to unlock Elpis, and Grace reveals multiple times that she doesn't know the password. Now, Leon's brilliant plan to escape the small platform that he, Grace, and Timu Wesker are on is to shoot a piece of machinery that causes the entire arm to come crashing down. He and Grace then jump onto it as it's crashing into the abyss, but luckily they happen to land on the tiny moving platform that safely and miraculously takes them to a small garbage dump before passing out.
In the moment, it just seemed like you wanted to die, but somehow you just knew that platform was going to be there.
You know what's also amazing? Is that it's revealed that Leon is dying from stage 3 T-virus. If you've read the notes, you'll realize that at stage 3 T-virus, you have like 2 hours to live. So Leon is like as dead could possibly be. So Grace decides she's gonna delve further into Ark and discover what Alyssa had hidden from her in the beginning of the game. Now she learns that Spencer had come to regret his actions and adopted Grace.
Who is that? Is that one of your subjects?
Of course not. She was alone in the world. I took her in to make amends.
Is she...
Perfectly normal. Just an average child needing a home. She is my hope.
And after she watches this footage from the past with her mom and Spencer, Grace sees that Leon has made his way back to Zeno, and they group up and confront Zeno together. Grace again says to Leon right before this, when they're alone,
I don't know the password.
so you can't even say, oh, well, she lied to Zeno about not knowing the password. She's completely sincere here talking to Leon. And also keep in mind that she is working under the presumption that Elpis is a mind control weapon and that any wrong password will destroy it forever. Because remember, Victor and Zeno have been telling her that is what the purpose of Elpis is for, because that's what they believe it to be. And for reasons unbeknownst to us, the canon ending in this game is that Grace chooses not to destroy Elpis, but to release it to this psychotic murderer based on a hunch that Hope must be the correct password because she happened to hear Spencer and Alyssa use the word in that video footage that she saw earlier.
Please know that you are my hope.
She is my hope. A blind hope.
Okay. This is it.
And her reasoning being, well, Spencer regretted what he did. Now, Grace has been shown to be just a complete moron throughout the campaign, yet in this scene, she becomes omniscient. She not only guesses the correct password based on a whim, but she then instantly realizes that Elpis is an antiviral and not a weapon, despite zero evidence to point her towards that.
Elpis is Spencer's atonement. It's an antiviral.
She even tries to interrupt Zeno from injecting himself, despite knowing this. Had Zeno listened to her tell him that it was an antiviral, he wouldn't have injected himself and lost his powers and would have just killed them both on the spot.
Spencer regretted what he did.
Well done.
Why? My powers!
Like, we're running out of adjectives to describe how dumb she is. It's also revealed later on that there was no connection between Grace and Emily, meaning that Emily was a giant nothing burger of a character that served no purpose aside from extending the game's runtime and giving Grace a dumb excuse to go with the villains and to move the plot forward. Victor, upon seeing all this idiocy, marvels at Spencer's genius because he realized that Spencer's endgame was to create anarchy by causing the world's order to be thrown into chaos. And after that, Victor rightly calls Timu Wesker an imitation and promptly kills him, showing that his arc was, well, nothing. Genuinely nothing. Zeno's a wet fart of a character. He accomplished nothing and served no purpose.
And that is not an exaggeration. His entire story arc in this game is meaningless. Here's what he does in this game. first time you see him, he kills a bunch of soldiers to establish he's this big, dangerous threat. He dodges a bunch of Leon's bullets when they're on the platform together, Wesker style, to, I guess, aura farm and let you know how powerful he is instead of just killing him. He has no backstory. He adds absolutely nothing new to the lore. He doesn't even have a boss fight. And then his final moments in the campaign are him injecting himself with Elpis, having no clue what it does, losing his powers because of it, and then dies unceremoniously to the other lame, underdeveloped, stupid villain. That is this man's arc.
I mean, really all he accomplishes is giving Leon the Last of Us 2 treatment in the non-canon bad ending, but that's really about it.
But back to the canon ending. Grace uses Elpis on Leon to cure him, and Victor just stands back monologuing because, you know, if he were to do the sensible thing and kill Grace and Leon, the game would be over. But we can't have that. He has clearly read the script and knows what to do here. Leon then has the final boss battle with Victor, who it turns out is a nemesis. After Leon takes care of Victor, Grace and Leon are stranded at the bottom of the arc for, I kid you not, maybe 60 seconds before magical plot device man Chris Redfield sends in his troops to rescue them. It's kind of reminiscent of how he just kind of shows up with a tank in Village there towards the end.
He's been relegated to kind of just doing stuff.
Well, I can respect a man who gets things done.
Well, that's not exactly what he does. He just shows up and something crazy happens. That's kind of the story in a nutshell. Just crazy stuff just happens.
After they're saved by Chris, Emily, you know, the little girl who turned into a big flesh monster that Leon blasted repeatedly with his magnum earlier, she's somehow not dead and gets adopted by Grace to live a happy life. So much for any consequences in this game. And Leon's explanation to Grace about how Emily might just make it is that when he was shooting, he missed her vitals.
What?
Yeah, exactly. Huh? That.
Okay, whatever. Uncle. I don't know what to say. I'm befuddled.
I can only be speechless so many times of trying to come up with some dumb, clever thing to say about just how moronic everything in this game is.
You would think surely there's a plot point that has some logical narrative flow to it, but it's nothing. Throw crap at the wall, and I guess whatever slides down first, that's what we go with. I don't know.
It'd be a lot more tolerable if the game and its writers knew how stupid and inept they are, but I truly fear a lot of people are just gonna slurp this story up as a masterpiece.
Oh yeah, that's gonna happen. It is what it is. But finally, the game ends on a cliffhanger with some organization, perhaps the Connections, that has neutralized the BSAA and plans to send in the wolves. Now, I'm guessing this is set up for a future DLC or a sequel. But before we end, I really want to hammer home that on top of how stupid the story is and the characters are, it also retcons possibly the most important character in the entire Resident Evil franchise, which is Oswald Spencer. It not only paints him out as having a change of heart towards the end of his life in the video that Grace watches, but Grace's report after the events of the game come out and say that many people testified that he was a senile old man at the end of his life. Now, we know that neither of those things is true from his death scene in the Resident Evil 5 Lost in Nightmares DLC. I mean, his final words is him lamenting to Wesker about facing his mortality despite his old age. And he is very lucid throughout this whole cutscene.
I was to become a god. Creating a new world with an advanced race of human beings.
Does this sound like a man who is senile in the slightest? I mean, him and Wesker go back and forth in that scene before Wesker kills him. The rave reviews for it honestly feel so astroturfed. I'm not even saying that I can't see why some people like it, but this thing is breaking records on Metacritic and other places for the just insanely high review scores it's getting. And admittedly, the game does perform very well, at least on PS5 where we played it. And it seems that combined with the nice looking cutscenes is enough to convince a lot of people that the game is a masterpiece.
I mean, just the fact that it functions in 2026 is automatically meaning this is in contention for Game of the Year.
Probably. I hate to say it. It doesn't help that, you know, the influencers with early access keys for this game put in overtime to secure the narrative on this one. You really do have to give Capcom credit for making sure that all their biggest meat riders came in hot on this release.
It's also kind of funny how much people absolutely hated Resident Evil 6, but they love this game despite how half of the game is Leon sections that are essentially Resident Evil 6. I mean, what is the motorcycle joust sequence and skyscraper jump, if not straight cutouts from Resident Evil 6? Why do we love this but hate that? I don't get it.
Because this is the hot new thing, and at the time RE6 came out, there was actually other good releases for it to compete with. Now, just as you said, just by being functional, this is already a standout for the year. The glowing reviews and huge sales numbers that this game put up show that even after the dumpster fires of the Dead Rising remake and Monster Hunter Wilds, there are still tons of people willing to buy anything that Capcom puts their name on, as long as the review scores are good. I'd really like to believe that this game won't age very well once people get past the honeymoon phase, but I think RE7 and 8 still having a glowing reputation to this day tells me otherwise.